I think that it was Zuckerberg trying to say, okay, Trump, here's a olive branch. Like, I want to be friends.
He's got that other guy in his ear, right? That some other social media platform guy.
Yeah, Elon Musk.
He's
He wrote that letter and he put it out essentially where it was basically pretty much clear that Trump was going to get reelected.
Yeah, he timed it
and everything, and
it was very like.
So I noticed that, and then he sent like this big congratulations when this stuff had happened, and now like you said, like the olive branch and everything else of like, hey, let me put a friend of his on a board to kind of let him know that, hey, we're willing to be partners. So one could call it a smart play, one could call it a sellout or whatever it may be.
What do you think? Do you think he's authentic, or do you think it's just he's playing the game?
I think he's a businessman.
Yeah.
Like him, love him, hate him, whatever it may be. It's very, very clear with President Trump that you just don't want to mess with the guy. Like, you have no clue what he's going to do.
And I think that's part of his overall strategy. I mean, hey, we can be friends, but we can also be enemies. You know what I mean? Kind of like throwing that olive branch out, but also, the carrot and the stick. The carrot and the stick.
He's posturing in every way. I mean, with this whole Gulf of America, with Canada,
Greenland,
he's posturing.
he's
Like,
playing games.
I love it.
I don't know.
It's such a flex, man.
Or if it's like fuck around and find out. Like, one way or another.
I don't know. Yeah. Welcome to the Runway, a roundtable discussion about current events, Web3, and technology. Today, I'm joined with 3 guests, and we're going to have a panel discussion about what's happening in the world and in the markets. Welcome, guys. Scott, why don't you lead off and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Scott Anderson. Background is in real estate, private equity for 6 to 7 years, real estate brokerage for 4 or 5 years after that. Involved in investments now on the commercial side, single family side, and then short-term rentals. Got orange pilled around 2020, so I'm a little bit newer to the scene. But ever since I took that step in, I haven't really looked back. So excited to engage in conversation with you guys.
Sweet.
Marlon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Marlon Avery, self-taught software engineer. Taught myself how to code quite some time ago. From there, started to kind of get into ed tech while teaching other individuals how to code and placing them into jobs and stuff afterward. Shortly after that, kind of got the attention of a venture capital firm where I became engineering director at the largest minority-owned venture capital firm based out of the Midwest. Also, too, where my AI journey started. So I built one of the first AI grant writers on top of GPT-3. It was like 2019 or something like that. And then since then, I've been building and teaching AI workshops, development, those as well. So now I run a company called AI Impact, which we teach organizations, governments, institutions how to implement artificial intelligence. And I also run an agency called VoicePath, where we build custom voice solutions for SMBs.
Good luck beating that, Jack.
No, I just answered an ad from Craigslist. All right. Well, I'm Jackson Fife. All my friends call me Jack. And I'm honored to be here and hang out and get to know all of you. Right into the mic, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, I come from a long background of pretty much crazy adventures around the world. I'm a retired ski patrol person and relocated my entire life out here to the Gulf of America now.
Gulf of America now.
Yeah, to be close to the warm tropics, closer to the equator, and of course take care of the rest of the family as we just sort of enjoy a really new chapter of life. And glad to know all of you.
Yeah.
Trying to get some variety on this podcast, spice it up a little bit.
There you go.
Get people in all different areas, working on different things, etc. So, Paul, what do you got queued up for us today to discuss?
Yes. Yes. Ooh. I was going to go right for that.
Sweet. All right. So, Mark Zuckerberg being on the Joe Rogan Experience, I think that just released today.
Yeah.
From what I heard, the clips that I've heard so far, I haven't had a chance to listen to the episode, but what I've heard so far, just blatant unconstitutional censorship attempts by the government. He's blatantly just saying they wanted him to take down memes and yelling and screaming at him and all sorts of crazy. I mean, It's crazy to think that in America this could happen. Why don't you jump in on this first, Scott? What are your thoughts?
Well, I knew that Dana White had joined their board, which people were up in arms
That
about.
was like a couple days ago, right?
Yeah. So I actually didn't know that he was on Joe Rogan, but I have some liberal friends, and that's not my leaning, but that are, see through that as, they're trying to manipulate Zuckerberg or Facebook through Dana White himself. I don't know. I think that it's interesting.
So help me out with the significance. Was the Dana White ad like a token move or more of a sincere upgrade to the game plan?
I think that it was Zuckerberg trying to say, okay, Trump, here's a olive branch. Like, I want to be friends.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that that's how the liberals.
He's got that other guy in his ear, right? That some other social media platform guy.
Yeah, Elon Musk.
He's
What do you think, Marlon?
I agree. I follow tendencies, and I follow patterns, and I don't find it a coincidence that he put out that this is what happened. He wrote that letter, and he put it out essentially where it was basically pretty much clear that Trump was going to get reelected.
Yeah, he timed it
and everything, and
it was very like.
So I noticed that, and then he sent like this big congratulations when stuff had happened, and now like you said, like the olive branch and everything, and stuff like, hey, let me put a friend of his on a board to kind of let him know that, hey, we're willing to be partners and stuff too as well. And so I see this, I see this as a move. You do that same exact move if you're an enemy of the U.S. and everything to help avoid war. Mm-hmm. Everything. And so I think this is the exact same thing he's doing. So he doesn't want war to be, pawn upon meta. And, one could call it a smart play. One could call it a sellout or whatever it may be.
What do you think? Do you think he's authentic, or do you think it's just he's playing the game?
I think he's a businessman.
Yeah,
I think he's a businessman. And I think, when you see yourself in a lane where there is a bigger shark in the water with the government that can really do some damage and everything to the things that you built, anything. I think at some point you got to play game. And I think the more you push against that, the more, you can definitely see things start to explode. I mean, that's what happened with AT&T. I think it was Bell South thing, I believe. And they was forced to get split up. And everything, and so I think you play as much as the notion, and particularly in this country, it's like be your own boss, and you don't answer to anybody, things like that. One thing you still want to avoid is the government, Uncle Sam.
Getting all in your
you
biz.
still want to try your best to avoid a fist fight and stuff with them. Because
full on street fight.
Yeah, and everything, especially too when like them, love them, hate them, whatever it may be. It's very, very clear with President Trump that you just don't want to mess with the guy. Like, you have no clue what he's going to do and everything. He's irrational in some ways, and he think through other things like that. But a lot of the irrational things that is tied to him is also have the backing of the U.S. military. Yeah. And so you just don't want to be on that side. And I think a lot of our other countries also know that. This is also why I see a lot of people saying like, "Hey, congrats!
Yeah,
we're ready to talk. We can work this out and everything." Of course,
that's a message to the world. Though.
Of course,
not just like companies, but what you just said is like so profound because other countries too. You just don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's part of his overall strategy. I mean, hey, we can be friends, but we can also be enemies. You know what I mean? Kind of like throwing that olive branch out, but also the carrot and the stick. The carrot and the stick.
He's posturing in every way. I mean, with this whole Gulf of America, with Canada,
Greenland,
he's posturing.
he's playing games.
I love it.
I don't know.
So such a flex,
do
man.
it, or it's like fuck around and find out. Like one way or the other.
I don't know. Yeah,
it feels like 90%
Go ahead, try me.
10% like I will actually do.
I just people have to account for that, even if it's 1%. 1% chance that he's gonna do something fucking crazy, press that button, whatever. You got to account for that, right? Yeah. It's like you might be willing to say like, let's make let's just accept a little bit worse deal because of that 1 to 2% that he wakes up and he's got his orange hairs popped up that day, and you just don't know.
It's the ultimate atonement of fear.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate version of that.
Guessing.
I mean,
Yes.
and yeah, there's a famous quote. I think it's from Machiavelli. When if you can't be loved and feared, it's better to be feared.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think that's a quote from
Yeah.
it's a famous political book.
I heard he even had the plates on the beast changed to FAFO.
Did he really?
F around and find out.
He's a wild one, man. So what do you think about all this Zuckerberg stuff?
Oh, well, I think it was kind of, tried to make it look kind of soft and sweet and cotton candy, like a mea culpa-ish. And yet, in a way, was revealing to kind of what they'd really been up to the whole time. So I'm kind of willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, a little bit of face value.
Wow.
I don't trust it all.
Yeah.
So, let's see how we're going to move forward. I'd like to see the platform kind of regain maybe some credibility and some honor, perhaps. And not that I put all my stock, say, in say the Twitterverse or X, even though I enjoy that space and I kind of like seeing the new leader, blah blah blah. So Mark's kind of made a stand. He kind of made a choice that says, I'm going to play calculus with the rest of the world, and either we're going to get cut, like Marlon, like you just said, or it's going to be a street fight, or I'm going to find a way to kind of play ball and evolve the brand. So
Right.
I'm willing to give them, some room to kind of do it. I don't trust them. I don't happen to go on those products, by the way. It's not my space, but I get it.
I
got
think
to
it's
do something.
the first step of hey, all these things happened. He put out that letter previously. He put out this,
Yeah.
and I think that's the first step. But I will say he didn't have the honor to do it immediately once he realized it.
True.
He waited until he knew that Trump was
True.
probably going to win. So
Yeah.
he loses brownie points in my book for that. I mean, I will say,
I
hey,
agree.
we'll take the ally and the fight for freedom and no censorship and all that. That's great. But I personally, he hasn't convinced me that he's authentic. Now, I will say this
I agree.
about Dana White.
It's a ways to go.
I actually love putting Dana White there, and I'll tell you why. Because if you look at the UFC, he's got all sorts of people that fight in the UFC.
Right.
Whatever religion, race, lesbian couples, whatever. And when they go up to that podium, I think who's the one guy who always is it Sean Strickland? And he goes up there and says the craziest shit.
Yeah.
And then they all go to Dana White and they're like, tell your fighters not to say this or not to think that. And you know what he says? He says, fuck you. I don't tell them who to vote for. I don't tell them what to think. That's it. And that is really the message that a social media platform should have, right? I mean, you are not the policeman of the world, right? Like, you're providing a service. If something's illegal, like, violence, child porn, whatever the fuck it is that's illegal, if it's illegal, take it off. If it's not, if it's opinions or thoughts or speculations or even a crazy person saying crazy shit, that's not your job. And that's my personal belief.
I like it.
That's my thought. Because so many of these conspiracies, they use conspiracy this, conspiracy that, they all came out to be true, right? So you basically, you lied. You got fact checked yourself. You fact checked yourself.
I also don't want to skip over the point of administrations pushing an agenda.
Yes.
Through social media.
Yeah.
I think I would attest that that's a larger issue even in the social media side, of things, because the social media side definitely has its impact and it can affect people's opinions, and it definitely can impact individuals' subconscious and everything. But when you start to impact people's direct health, in real time, everything through the lack of or just the manipulation of aspects around vaccines, and you don't want to be transparent and stuff there, or you don't want to be patient or whatever the case may be. In my thought process, and as I'm watching again patterns, I had the I wouldn't say privilege, but I had the ability to watch when what was the big thing that happened like a decade ago with the monkey?
The vid?
No, it was like a disease that
Monkeypox?
no
Ebola?
There it is.
Oh, that's right.
So I was in Atlanta when Ebola happened and everything. So at that time, my mom was sick, so I was like watching the news rigorously and everything, trying to make sure she's okay, what I need to do, what I need to avoid. And so how my mind works is, as a software engineer, I can see patterns and everything. And so what I watched was it had this hard push of like what was happening and everything. That in real time, this thing is happening. They move the patient stuff here and everything, and one could call it, consistently updates. Another person could call it fear. Anything that was pushing, and then I started. They would say, okay, now you guys need to go buy this, go do this, go move over here, go get this vaccine, everything, and then all of a sudden it went away. Everything. So I'm like, interesting. Everything. It goes away.
And the same doctors that were surrounding the Ebola incident were also the same doctors that are around covering up the COVID vaccine too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the evidence of everything that happened is like so
Not to
blatant
cut
at
you
this
off, sorry,
point.
but
Like,
it's very similar.
They were all
what they were
connected,
doing,
really?
how they were trying to cover up the
Same
fact that
group?
They're all
Really?
the
So-
Fauci
Oh,
crew.
I didn't
So
know that.
watch this. To your point,
yeah,
when COVID happened, I saw that same playbook.
All right.
Rise in fear, point in direction, and all of a sudden it went away. And so when I noticed that, I was like, oh, no, fuck you guys. Like, no, I'm not listening to nothing you say. everything, because I understood then, okay, then why does it go away? It only goes away, in particularly in this country. No. It only goes away, particularly in this country, when a dollar amount has been met. Money's been made. Everything. Now it goes away. And everything. And so once I noticed that with COVID, and I was like, I'm not listening to anything you guys say and everything. I'm going to figure out ways how to protect my own self, increase my own, natural immunity, things like that.
Yeah.
And literally during that time period, I was never sick. In and out of airports, 'cause I was working as well. And I took care of 3 people who had COVID.
yeah, I remember that. That's I like my thought process on this is like I have no problem with them rushing out whatever they want to rush out, and like if people want to take it, by all means take it. But don't force people.
Don't manipulate.
Don't manipulate, gaslight, lie, and force people to take an experimental vaccine that was warp speeded out, right? That was Trump called it warp speed. I got no problem with the warp speed, but let people make their own decisions, right?
That's selfish. You don't care about grandma and your aunt and all that.
That's the counter argument,
That
right?
would be the counter argument.
Yeah.
Up in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New England, it was you're selfish to not get that
that's-
first vaccine.
The posture of
That's
fear.
gaslighting.
And
That's
it's completely
gaslighting.
and but they still stick to that.
I mean, they're out of their minds. I mean, they natural immunity in basic science. You learn that any time you naturally get an antibody to a thing, it's way better than an artificial type of response.
100%.
So if people had natural immunity, they were still telling you to get the vaccine. I mean, that is not based in science whatsoever. That's anti-science. I mean, that's absurd, right?
But they don't know that, and maybe this plays into the
No,
social
they
media
do know
conversation.
They know that. They should.
They do know
should
that.
know
They
that.
pretend,
They should know that.
So I am in contact with a lot of people that live up there. They don't know that.
That's how stupid they are, is what you're
Exactly.
saying.
I think it might be a social media
What they get
bubble
fed.
that they live in. What they
Wait,
get fed.
I'm sorry. Who's the they? You say they don't know.
Just people that I know.
People that you know.
In general?
But
in
the
general.
Oh, okay.
But Anthony
I thought you were saying like the
Fauci-
doctors.
No.
the
Yeah,
immunologist
like the
or
higher ups.
Fauci
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
The people who are maybe taking in
Should
that
know that.
social media that
Yeah,
we're talking
yeah.
about, they should know
Yeah.
that, but I don't think they do because the stuff that they're either reading or looking at online, they're not seeing the correct information.
Yeah.
They don't know that that the vaccine didn't stop you from getting COVID or giving COVID.
Well, they lied about that. They said that it'll stop transmission.
Yeah.
They had all these lies. They came out and said all this stuff.
And so at this point, they've come off of we know it's not 100% effective.
Yeah,
That's
I mean-
that everyone knows that, but the other
Well, because but this is part of the whole censorship. If you look at Mike Benz is talking about, this is part of the whole censorship industrial complex, which ties into what Zuckerberg was saying, which was like they wanted us to take things down that were factually true. Right. But the idea is that it doesn't. When they take people to these government
If it's
conferences,
not
and
a
they tell
part of
them,
our agenda.
it's not part of our agenda.
Yeah.
If it doesn't promote, whatever they want to promote, they are advocating taking down totally unconstitutional, totally against the First Amendment, using government funds to put pressure on private companies to take down factually true information. Right. I mean, that is some like crazy shit. That's like some George Orwell shit. I mean,
until
this
they
is
hit a
absurd.
number. And then
Until
they'll
they hit a
let it
number.
out.
Yep.
A couple years
Yep.
down the road,
Whatever it
they're
may be. I mean,
Yep.
I don't know all those details, but you guys said it. You guys said it.
All right. So in this episode of Undercover Boss, right? We are the top bosses, and we're determining how these other bosses have handled the situation. We were talking about Mark Zuckerberg doing whatever the hell he just did and rolled out there. Whether or not we can judge it as sincere. And I just wanted to tangent back to there was a guy that ran the X space before, right? Twitter. Have you heard Jack Dorsey talk about this topic a little bit?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of keying off of what you were saying about the pressure that was there for them to shape the narrative and whatnot, and whether or not we're willing to trust these kind of people that are moving forward, whether or not it's Elon taking over X or Mark, the Zuck acting like they can move forward somehow with their brand. How do we trust it? Do we boss them or toss them? Find out in next episode.
What else you got for us, Paul? What do you got queued up for us?
I just look at how quickly he changed to his
I know, he's
physical aesthetic. It's
Yeah.
like I don't trust that in itself.
yes.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
I think what it is, and again, there's a huge. They did a study on this. I saw it. Like the more you work out, and the more the more active you are physically working out, doing stuff. Like you switch from being like left leaning to right leaning. So like it's crazy to see that. No, they like did science on it, and like men that are physically fit at working out, active, lean more to the right. And I think that he got in the gym and started doing all this shit, training for his fight with Elon. That they were talking shit to each other. They were gonna do this fight. He started training and shit. And all of a sudden, like, oh, I'm a fucking, I like Trump now. So yeah, there's something there to that. There's like some kind of Mikado or whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know what the correlation is.
Oh, okay.
So New Hampshire, what do we got here? What do you got for us, Paul?
I was going to say it.
New Hampshire, North Dakota introduced bills for strategic Bitcoin reserve. So I think this is a common theme of what's happening, and I think not only states but nation states, companies. Huge. I think this is going to be a huge theme in 2025. I think we're going to see multiple nation states form strategic Bitcoin reserves. I think we're going to see multiple
Explain
states.
Bitcoin reserves.
So a strategic Bitcoin reserve would be like, we as the government, we have reserves of funds that we need to use for things. Like right now, Florida has one of the only states, we have a $30 billion surplus. So a state like California that is having wildfires because they don't have water in their fire hydrants because they're terribly mismanaged and hundreds and thousands of people are dying. We have the opposite problem. We have $30 billion just sitting there in a bank account, essentially, just sitting doing nothing, right? Getting debased by government printing money. And they could, instead of leaving that $30 billion to sit there, they could take a portion of that, maybe 20%, and they could buy Bitcoin, which over time historically has increased 60% a year in value relative to other currencies. So a strategic Bitcoin reserve would be like, hey, we're going to take this Bitcoin, we're going to set it aside, we're not going to touch it. It's going to be a reserve asset. The U.S. has gold and other assets that it has right now. Oil is a strategic reserve asset. So adding Bitcoin to that is just, the digital gold of the future. We're going to have it. We're going to sit it there. If we ever need to use it to pay down our debt or whatever, we'll have it there to use that for, right? And many states are state and national.
Okay.
Both.
But Jerome
All
says
of
they're
the
not going to be buying that. Jerome Powell, remember the other day?
He said that that's not part of
He said they
their
don't
mandate, but that is
He's
not
only
his.
got a year
Yeah,
left
so that
anyways.
he's got a year left on his thing, but I don't think he can.
Are we listening to him?
I don't think he controls that. I think that is set by Congress, and the president could do an executive
I know.
order. Executive order isn't something that it could be removed by the next president. But if Congress passes legislation where you have reached, and I think my understanding is that there is, and this is what the little birdies are telling me. I've got little birdies and different, some of them go over to Mar-a-Lago, some of them go here, some of them go there. Who knows what's true, the rumor mill. But that they actually do have the votes in Congress. There's enough people on the other side of the aisle that actually are pro-crypto, that do want to see this strategic, national reserve, that this is going to get across the finish line. So
And to give more credence to that, Jack Mallers and Odell both kind of hinted to that as well. That
did they? I haven't heard from them, but
a couple weeks
I heard
ago.
Matt talking about that. Okay.
So, full disclosure, I went on Robinhood and bought a fucking fuck ton of MicroStrategy calls. So, that's a gamble. Basically, I am betting that this does play out, over the next month or
Well,
two.
what does Polymarket say?
That's actually pull that up, Paul. Give us the
we need
Poly
our
market
finger on the
odds
pulse.
of a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
I think it's at like 35.
But again,
that right up.
and options would be just like a bet. You're betting on something happening, so it's just
Absolutely.
a gamble, right? It could happen in the timeline, it could not.
Smart.
If it does, it does. If it does, it doesn't. I know what I'm doing. I made a gamble, and I think that potentially, if nation states do announce a strategic Bitcoin reserve, I think that's going to be an extremely bullish catalyst price wise.
Maddie, why are some people trying to make?
So
a
we're down.
distinction?
So go back down. So in the first 30 days, what is this? The first, what's the bet?
100
Will
days.
Trump create Bitcoin reserve in first 100 days? Okay, so we've got a 27% chance of that happening. I like those. I mean, 27% chance, that's, I could 100x my money for 25% chance. I think that's worth it.
And to bet it on.
I think those are some good odds.
Yeah, I think
I
so
like
too.
that. 27% chance to 100x my investment. If it comes through, I really like that. So that was the play. That's the play. Don't take financial advice from me. I'm just a degenerate gambler. But I'm gonna rub it in if you come back and look at this episode a couple weeks later, and I'm gonna post all that. There will be signs. I'm gonna do my little Robinhood screen chart. 100x. All right, Paul. What do you got next for us?
We're talking about the boss or toss, right?
Mm-hmm.
right? An undercover boss job that we do when we're out there making judgments in the world and whatnot. So there was this, if you notice, California spontaneously burst into flames the other day.
Yeah.
Kind of really tragic, terribly sad.
I mean, you got to pull up
Having-
Trump's tweet on that. That is like comedic gold.
So, yeah, well, I was just going to key on a quick, weird, odd sentiment I caught from the governor of California, and he was talking about, somebody kind of asked him about the problem with the water coming through the hydrants. Did you catch him? And he kind of made a deflection. He sort of said, well, that's up to the local people to be taking care of whether or not they got water in their hydrants to solve the kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's a failure
And power
on both
too.
levels.
Well,
Failure on both levels.
So in terms of leadership and
Pull up Trump's Telegram. I saw it on Telegram. He had a comment thread about it. I don't know if you can find it somewhere. Maybe it's on his platform, Truth Social. I don't know what he's
And then the
posting on
governor of
these
California
days.
went a little further and tried
I don't
to be
think
like,
it's on
oh,
X.
that other guy's trying to politicize all that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, no, they made strategic decisions to redirect, to not take the water that they had, and they basically said, we're going to not send it there because of some fish or something called a smelt.
Yeah.
I think Trump has a classic tweet on this whole thing.
Yeah.
You're going to have to go to Telegram to find that.
Smelt doesn't he make good bait?
He
And
actually,
that doesn't make good sushi.
Trump talked about it on Joe Rogan as well a couple months back.
He did kind of, he did
did.
mention that. They were kind of
Vietnam,
talking about how they don't have water and there's a problem. Well, that's actually pretty prescient that he actually was talking about that. And he was saying like, hey, this is total incompetence by the government. A month later, the fucking place burns down. That's crazy. I mean, these are strategically poor decisions by people in power that have massive
Who
consequences.
could potentially be president in 4 years?
Yeah, that is crazy.
I mean,
Oh, you
Newsom has
think?
got to be up.
Paul,
there
you got to
for
find that
Democrats.
Telegram.
Is that his big play?
That Telegram.
I think.
Wait,
How
who?
could it not be,
Okay.
right?
Truth Social. Go to
Gavin.
Trump's Truth Social.
Gavin, yeah.
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 Looks
Him
good.
and maybe Kamala jump back in that game. What?
Dynamic duo.
Yeah, we got to find
Oh,
this.
boy.
Don't you love the media? They spread disinformation. There it is. Trump says
Yeah.
Governor Gavin Newsom. Let's see if he's got the X
What
take.
is New York Post. Well, there it is. The smell.
There it is. Go up. He's out here. They're quoting him in this right now. Let's see. He goes.
Look at-
I'm just gonna read this
Look
off
at
my
that photo
phone.
op
It
right
is
there.
classic.
Gavin chilling, getting his suntan in front of the.
There's
building.
the smell. Go ahead, show the smell. That's the smell. So I'm gonna find the post. It's classic, dude. He said that.
The quote's right there.
No, it's a whole long thing. So here it is. Governor Gavin Newsom refused to sign the water restoration declaration put before him that would have allowed millions of gallons of water from excess rain and snowmelt from the north to flow daily into many parts of California, including the areas that are currently burning in a virtually apocalyptic way. He wanted to protect an essentially worthless fish called a smelt by giving it less water. In parentheses, it didn't work, ! But don't care about the people of California. Now the ultimate price is being paid. I will demand that this incompetent governor allow beautiful, clean, fresh water to flow into California. He is to blame for this. On top of it all, no water for fire hydrants, not firefighting planes, a true disaster. And then he says, as of the moment, Gavin Newsom and his Los Angeles crew have contained exactly 0% of the fire. It is burning at levels that even surpassed last night. This is not government. I can't wait till January 20th. No water in fire hydrants, no money in FEMA. This is a disaster. Essentially.
It is.
Yeah.
You guys hear the antecedent or whatever about the insurance, homeowners insurances being dumped
pulled.
en masse?
Yeah, apparently I read something
6
too.
months before
I
or
read
something
something
like
too
that.
that
Somehow
they 6
magically?
months ago the insurance
then
companies
made it
all
fire.
canceled, and then she sent the governor or the mayor of that area sent all of the firefighting, sent like a bunch of their firefighting equipment. They sent it to Ukraine.
Oh, to
Like, you cannot make this up. They literally sent the county's firefighting equipment that they didn't have for this fire to Ukraine. Cannot make this up. I feel like these stories and these articles just write themselves. I mean, it's just like unbelievable.
And to
Crazy.
go back to the COVID thing, there was like 200 or 300 firefighters who were fired because they didn't get the COVID vaccine that they didn't
Wow.
hire.
Wow.
Clearly understaffed for this event, so
I was
bring
wondering.
it back full circle.
Yeah. Yeah. That's happening a
US
lot.
Ski Patrol dumped all of us. That's what I was doing
Yeah.
back then.
Airplane industry too as
Awesome
well.
job.
Nurses.
Well, so boss or toss? Gavin, is he? I mean, is he really steering the state
He's
into
terrible.
greatness or what?
He's the biggest hypocrite. He is literally, in my opinion, the scum
but
of the
he's
earth.
going to run for
He's
the
the scum. He is
president?
literally the scum of the earth. I mean, during COVID, he was doing all this shit, firing people from their jobs, doing all this the stuff that you just described, pushing forward for that. At the same time, they have him at like he was literally at a restaurant with a
French
bunch of people
laundry.
with no masks on, like whatever it is.
French
Yeah, it's like
laundry.
rules for thee, but not for me. I mean, what a hypocrite.
The French Laundry, yeah.
Yeah, that was
classic
wild.
episode.
Wild.
So what do we do? Do we blame it on the leadership right there? Because Gavin, like when I first brought it up, he was trying to deflect, saying, "Oh, those are local problems."
What I think CNN
people
and
that
the
should have
liberal
been-
media is trying to say is that Trump was saying that the Democrats started the fire, which I think is just, again, misinformation. It's more of, he's not blaming them for starting the fire. It's more like the reaction to the fire was.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They love to play those games. They just put these framing in the articles to manipulate and gaslight people. Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
their
the
whole
response
game.
was poor. Newsom obviously doesn't know what to do. The mayor wasn't even in town. I'm pretty sure she was in.
Yeah. Somewhere.
She was abroad somewhere in Africa or something at the time, which isn't her fault. But
So does it turn into like the Maui situation when that all blew up in flames as well, and those people were stranded, right? No ways. I mean, almost sounds a little familiar. And then it somehow got memory hold.
there's those conspiracies that are definitely already popping up. That
I get that. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just happy to be in Florida, man. Like when we have a natural disaster here, it's like the response is like ahead of time, the state of emergency. We've got everything mobilized. It's just totally different levels of governance, and we get such a better value, and we have a $30 billion surplus. Meanwhile, they're throwing hundreds of billions at homelessness, and it just increases and increases and increases. Because of incentives, right? When you throw money at something, a lot of times it's not spent well, and
I didn't hear the stat about actually giving funds from LA to Ukraine. But you just think about the
no, it was
amount of money.
actual firefighting equipment.
I heard they were sending equipment.
It was
right?
excess firefighting equipment that they desperately need right now to deal with this scenario. From that, isn't that
Just
wild?
think of the billions that we're giving to Ukraine. They were giving to Israel while we have these.
Right.
It just blows my mind. It blows my mind.
No,
And I think that was why Trump got elected in a lot of ways. I mean, people see like the grift and the bullshit.
Yeah, it's like a
They're
betrayal, right?
I think.
Yeah.
They were giving money to the Taliban too. They let the incompetent withdrawal there, and they apparently they're still getting money somehow through some kind of grant or some kind of program that there's like they're just applying. They're swearing the money. I mean, that's crazy. I think Rand Paul exposed that. Just crazy. Crazy.
Boss
Paul,
or
what else you
toss?
got for us?
Toss the Gavin.
Toss the
Toss
Gavin's
the
got to
Newsom.
go.
All right. So Trump wants to. He's what's all this great flex about Greenland and Panama
Oh yeah,
and the
Greenland Panama
Gulf
stuff.
and wherever else? Is it?
I think it's posturing, like I said before.
It's a great flex, right?
But
Wait, what is it?
So Greenland is
Well-
currently owned by Denmark. I believe
Didn't they
Denmark
just
owns.
get some independence? From
And well, I guess they're gonna.
Recently?
The Greenlanders are gonna vote to be like independent.
Right.
And this is just like some giant ice rock up,
Yeah,
up
yeah.
there. And there's probably, I mean, it is beautiful, and there's tons of natural resources there, which probably has nothing to do why Trump wants to acquire it.
Yeah.
But it's also very strategically important for like say there's a World War III or something like that. Greenland is like it's a very strategic point between Russia, the United States, and China, et cetera. So there's a lot of Trump's already upset about the fact that the United States is paying for most of NATO's budget. We're the largest spender, and like it's really like they're all over there in Europe. Like they want to be protected from Russia or whoever. Like why are we paying most of that budget? Like they made commitments, and I think this was his last term. This is why they all hate him over there. Is because he's like, yo, you guys all agreed to pay 2% of your GDP towards the budget. Why are none of you paying 2% of your GDP? And why are we paying like 5% of ours, right? So he raised very legitimate criticisms towards that, right?
It was.
So I think this Greenland thing is, he's kind of looking at that and saying, hey, this is a very strategically important place. There's natural resources here. In war, to have military bases, all that kind of stuff, it would be, a good thing to acquire. And more rumors, I'm just hearing through the grapevine. I'm going to tell you what I've heard. And what I've heard is that they would offer to pay each citizen like $1 million if they vote yes, and Greenland becomes part of the United States. So hold on. I did the math on this. You guess how many citizens? Guess how many citizens there are in Greenland?
Less than Naples.
I couldn't even guess.
Less than Naples.
Less than
56,000 people that live in Greenland.
Yeah.
That's $56 billion.
So it's
We
a
sent like $100
bargain.
billion to Ukraine like last week.
That's a bargain.
I mean, like, that would be like a 99% referendum. Like, I vote yes, I get $1 million.
Sweet.
I mean, I'll fucking Denmark, United States, most powerful country in the world. I think that if that's the play and that's his strategy, that's gonna work. If the citizens there all each get $1 million to join the United States, you better fucking believe they're gonna check that yes mark on the box.
Does it go with the Canada play?
I don't know how many people are in Canada. I don't know. If people,
No, I just said. I mean,
Yeah.
Justina Trudeau. He was like,
He's gone.
he's happy to surrender. Apparently, right? Maybe that could work out. Slice up those provinces, make the whole North American continent.
And the person who's running now for Prime Minister of Canada is apparently a Bitcoiner. I don't know if you guys
Pierre
Oh,
Poilievre. I think they last I checked,
is that
he's.
right?
What can you pull up Pierre Poilievre? His odds to win. So I think there's going to be a massive shift to the right in Canada as well. I think I think when Trudeau used the Emergency Act to basically consider the truckers that were protesting the vaccines,
Yes.
when he did that and he declared them terrorists,
Yes.
canceled their bank accounts, basically was using powers that were meant for war as a dictator or like a totalitarian, authoritarian. I mean, that was like a shocking thing to see in a Western country. Yeah. You'd expect that from like a China, but you would not expect that from a Western country. So I think he sealed his death now when he did that.
He really did.
So
right.
it's good that he's already resigned, but he just hasn't exited. They haven't picked a new leader yet, so that was an old article then. Yeah, 80. So
Well,
he
it
resigned
also-
I think 2 days ago, Paul, or something like that. So he has officially resigned. So that was just an old picture.
6.
So it sends a particular message around the globe as well, right? Because I mean,
You have to go to Poly Market,
there's
go to their actual website. Paul.
adversaries, you could say, perhaps, right? That are traveling around and doing other things, right? So I'm not sure I heard this from. It was about like whether or
Go
not
to
like
global
the,
elections?
that China
It's one of the options
kind
right
of
underneath
does
there.
various things in different places, and they've been surrounding Greenland recently, right? Russia does this.
Yeah,
and
so he's
that,
up to
and there's
90%.
The issue of the melting polar caps or the Greenland proper territory and whatnot, control of territory. Doesn't it all evolve if you look back throughout the history of all the world and the world maps and territories?
Doesn't what evolve?
Is it what?
Say that one more time. What doesn't what evolve?
Well, I was just thinking, like, isn't this? Are we kind of witnessing something, the potential for it, right in front of our eyes? Like, you look at the old maps, like when I came up learning history and whatnot, and you see all the territories change, and one conquers the other. The Roman Empire was massive, and then they died, and then came the other one, and the Ottomans, all of them, and this and that.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
the
that's-
Egyptians. So, who's to say that we can't evolve somehow
We just
right now in our lifetime?
Well, we just witnessed Russia stealing territory from Ukraine. I mean, they literally just took over a couple areas. So that the map is going to change. I mean, it'll probably be 60 years before the world recognizes that they stole that territory. But eventually, that map will change and it will show, unless they negotiate some deal and give some of it back for some kind of security assurances.
So how much do we fight it? Where do we somehow in the 21st century act like nothing can change now? Everything is firm and those lines in the sand are been drawn and you're not allowed to take over my stuff anymore? People get conquered all the time.
Yeah, I mean, historically that has been the case. We do have, supposedly new treaties and certain things to prevent that from happening. But if it happens willingly, I think it's fine, right? If Greenland votes to not be a part and they want to do their thing like that, there's nothing wrong with that.
$1 million in my pocket.
But if you can get $1 million,
$1 million
I like
fiats.
that. Yeah. I think people will look the other way to become
Can they
part
use
of the
the
United States.
Bitcoin reserve to
What do you
help
think,
coax
Marlon?
the
You think $1
Greenland?
million is going to get the vote? $1 million ahead? Hell yeah, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm thinking. What about
Of
you,
course, the
Scott?
purchasing power by the time it goes through will be worth about $2,500.
I just think that there's a lot of conflict going on in the world, obviously, generally right now, and I'm just curious what Trump does when he gets in terms of Ukraine, in terms of Israel. Like, does he continue to back Ukraine? Does he continue to back Israel? Or does he decide to focus on things that are more domestic? And I think the idea is that he's going to pull a lot of that money back home, but there are so many strong connections, especially with Israel through the United States, that I don't necessarily seeing that relationship going away, but I hope that this funding of this Ukrainian war that's been going on forever.
I think we just need a negotiated settlement to that. I mean,
Yeah.
people, it's crazy how easily people are like so brainwashed about certain things. It's like, motherfucker, you can't even put Ukraine on a fucking map. Like, what the fuck does that have to do with us? Like, I feel for those people. Don't get me
It's
wrong.
power of social
You know
media.
what I mean? Like, I don't think we should have ever, when the Soviet Union fell, I think we should not have de-armed, Ukraine. We should have let them have their weapons, and we shouldn't have been involved, on that level with that. The second you don't have a nuke, I mean, you're sitting duck, right? I mean, like you need to have that nuclear deterrent, right? So like, hate to say it, but if everybody has a nuke, then it's a lot more peaceful out there. That's what I personally believe.
And I tried to watch as many interviews as possible. Like on Lex Friedman, Zelensky was just
Yeah.
on there, and I was so anti-Ukraine, anti-Zelensky. My own echo chamber was telling me all
Yeah.
these things. But
Yeah.
when I watched the interview, I actually kind of commiserate.
Of
with
course,
this guy.
yeah. I mean, I feel
actually
for-
feel bad.
yeah, I
for
feel
them
bad
again,
for
you
what
know, by
happened.
actually,
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
seeing him speak, and because he seems like a good guy, but like again, everything is has its own lens.
I'm glad you said that. I was willing to dismiss that and just delete it right out of my lineup.
I haven't
What,
seen
the
that
Lex Friedman
podcast.
podcast?
I haven't seen his
Well,
interview with Zelensky.
I like
yet.
Lex and all that, but I
Yeah.
figured Zelensky, no.
I
What,
gave
you're
it a
going to just
shot.
spin me some kind of junk I don't need?
I know.
I'm not going to send $5. Forget it.
Right. No, and I'm not going that far. And I think we've been funding that war for long enough, especially with the issues that we have at home. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I can see both sides a little bit more now. Having
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides.
I'm
to the
glad you
story,
said
right?
that.
I mean, it's
Maybe I'll give it a run through.
what sucks is the amount of people that have died, the destruction of towns and cities. I mean, like, not worth it. Sucks. Terrible.
and
you know,
BlackRock's just going to come in and take over.
Oh my God. That's right.
they're gonna rebuild that. They're gonna rebuild.
Here comes the
everything.
infrastructure power.
Here comes here comes the $500 million deal to build a new city.
It's the Belt and Road game, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever we do. So,
All right.
boss or toss? So far, I'm going to say on Trump. We started this thing, we were talking about Greenland, I think is what I brought up. Greenland, Canada, Panama. What's going on with Panama, you guys? Have you been there?
I've been
I
there.
have not been there.
Lovely,
My
right?
sister, my parents lived there for 6 months. We spent a bunch of time in Buquete. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
And it's all in the U.S. dollar too. They have strong ties there,
Yeah.
obviously through the
Yeah.
canal. So I get it. I don't know as much about
So-
the actual them taking it over.
I'll toss this up and kind of like say what I know, right?
Yeah.
United States built that canal for Panama because they weren't competent enough or whatever to build it.
Kind of.
We paid for it. Hundreds of thousands, like I don't know if hundreds of thousands, but thousands of Americans died from dengue fever, all sorts of diseases to build that canal. So that is extremely strategically important. And Panama has sort of been allied with us in a lot of ways for a very long time. Great relationship. I think we sold it to them, or we did something for $1. Maybe I don't know exactly the specifics of it, but we did them a great favor, and they, obviously we get to use it. In the past decade, 20 years, China has sort of taken over management of that canal. They've got warehouses all along the thing. They're heavily involved with what's going on. So there's a geopolitical thing there, but also the government of Panama has been apparently ripping our ships and stuff off. Like every time we want to go through, it's like $200,000
Yeah.
per ship or whatever, right?
Every cruise ship, every tanker.
There's got to be a balance there, and I think that there's some exploitation, and I think that's what Trump's getting at when he's saying this shit. Like, hey, we're, you know what I mean? Like we built this shit. Like, you're not going to just continue to rip us off after we've helped you. We've done this. Like, we're not going to let China just come in and monitor all of our vessels and do all this stuff. So there's multiple things at play. Now, do I think Trump's going to go in and invade and go to war? No, I think he's just posturing like he always does, right? But there's other ways we can hit Panama. There's other financial, games we can play with them to hit them back, right? And I think when Trump is back in power, he's advocating for the United States of America in all these deals, right? If there's a deal where it's like, hey, you pay me $3 every time you do this, and I pay you $97 every time I do that, that is not a fair and balanced relationship, right? So Howard Lutnick, who's his commerce secretary, if he went on Pump's podcast, and he was talking about all these tariffs and all these different things, right? So what he's saying, and if you just think about it from like a textbook standpoint, right, of like free markets or whatever, like, yeah, we don't want tariffs. We want to have the freer the market is, the better. But I think the difference is in the application of real world reality, of strategic applications of some of these things.
Yes.
We allowed, I think it was World War II, or I believe it was World War II, after World War II, we allowed these other countries, because part of the Marshall Plan was to help them rebuild their nations, Germany, all these places, right, where there was war and destruction and death. And we said, look, here's how we're going to help you. We want you to rebuild your manufacturing, your cars, your auto, all of this stuff, your towns. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow you to put tariffs on our products, right? We're going to basically say, like, if we send you the product, the car or whatever from our thing, we're going to allow you to tariff that. And basically, no one's going to buy cars from us. They're going to want to buy cars at home, right? What's happened 40, 50 years later, 60 years later, is that those tariffs are still in place. That we sort of said, hey, we're not going to tariff your stuff, and we're allowing you to tariff our stuff to help you rebuild after the World War II. All those things are still there in a lot of these things, which is incredibly unbalanced and unreasonable. If we're your ally, you want us to pay for NATO and all this stuff, why are you tariffing our cars at 100%, yet we're letting you come to our market for free? So I think there's a lot of things that need to be reset. And I think a lot of the current status quo of government people are completely incompetent, and they don't understand the business world or the real world, and they think they're just kind of like, brainwashed to be in this mindset. Trump's from the real world. He's from the business world. He sees this stuff and he's like, what the fuck? This is totally unbalanced, right? Whereas somebody like, a Joe Biden who's been in government for 60 years, never had a real fucking job, right? Like never had a private business, nothing, has no clue about any of that, right? So it's just a different ball game. So I think that's the setup and that's the play.
And as part of that global exchange, we exported a lot of those jobs internationally as opposed to having them domestically.
Yeah.
With the idea that they'll manufacture, they'll give us the goods, we'll sell it back to them, and they'll give us money, but then they'll reinvest money that they have internationally back into our treasuries.
Like you're breaking up.
They'll reinvest into our treasuries. Ultimately, our 10-year treasury, 5-year treasury, to be able to like give back that money. And a lot of these major countries like Russia, like China, they're not reinvesting anymore in our 10-year treasuries, which is why you're seeing the yields in the 10 years go up. So a lot of that exchange of us exporting a lot of those jobs and then seeing that money in the end coming back to our government isn't happening anymore. So it just becomes a lot more complicated as to like, we should just bring those jobs home, instead of having them international, we might as well have them more domestic.
There's a lot of factors for sure. Yeah. And it gets, there's so much nuance there. And, we are the global reserve currency and we kind of have the financial center. And that's why so many of our jobs in America are finance. And again, you can go down rabbit holes and layers of that. And there's probably some balance there that makes sense depending on how the world is evolving and what's happening. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Anything anybody wants to talk about this week? Just something that came up.
So you have to go, Manny.
Yeah, I got to run, so that's why.
So if you want to end it here, wrap it, because there's a lot that can be talked about. Tim Scott, our previous governor, is being rumored to be appointed as a pro-crypto CFTC boss. So I thought that was interesting.
Wow, that is interesting.
Breaking news. So if you want to touch on it, you can. But
No, Tim Scott, I believe, isn't he from?
well, it's not Rick Scott. It's Tim Scott.
Tim Scott is South Carolina.
Oh, yeah, right.
Is South Carolina or North
Yeah.
South Carolina?
Pro-crypto guy.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think he's absolutely looking forward to have Senator Tim lead the Senate Banking Committee. I think that would be a fantastic addition, especially because Elizabeth Warren, I believe, was the previous one, if I'm correct.
Isn't she going to stay on?
Was she she's terrible. She is absolutely awful. She's the worst. But she
went to Harvard though.
Yeah,
There you
she's
go.
Native American, remember?
Credentials.
Yeah. So yeah, that could be. I think that would be amazing.
Has DeSantis said anything along the crypto Bitcoin lines?
My understanding is that he's positive about it, and they have supported. Like he signed off on our anti-CBDC bill in Florida that we put through the Florida Bitcoin and Blockchain Association. So we kind of said, hey, look, this is what we want, legislation that we want. We want to make sure that nobody's forced here in Florida to use a government-made currency. Nobody's forced to use it, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of said, no, we want optionality, and he actually signed that law.
Along with
So
Suarez
Congress
has
passed
been a positive influence in it as well.
What'd you say?
Mayor Suarez.
Suarez has been great. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
been a huge ally. So yeah, it's Florida.
Miami. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think Florida's been cooking.
Speaking of which, if we end up observing the Canadian zone, right, we've at least got DeSantis has handed out more Stanley Cup trophies than Justina Trudeau. So it's going to be in our favor. We're going to absorb all those the world-class hockey. We'll finally come home.
Which was a hockey guy. I'm a basketball guy. I don't know. You're speaking a different language.
Who's your team?
It's almost the same game,
Anybody else got anything? Any closing thoughts? All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I've had a pleasure having this chat with you guys. Hopefully, we'll pick it up next week.
Appreciate you.
Sure.
Peace.
All right.